Hello, and welcome to Tap That MTG, the show where we tell you everything we know about Magic the Gathering that's probably wrong, but fun to talk about. I'm Shauna, and
And
that's.
I'm Leslie.
And we are here today to bring you another pre-con deep dive video that we love to do. In this video, we're going to break down all the cards of the deck and talk to you about what this deck is meant to do, kind of what we think it does anyways, and how you can play it. And if you wait and stick around till the end, we will tell you some of the things we might do to tweak this deck if we had it in our possession. So without further ado, Leslie is going to tell you all about this commander and what this deck is called.
Yeah, so we have the pre-cons, I guess, that we're doing this time are from
Mhm.
Commander Masters set. So it's a little bit more expensive decks that you're
Yeah.
seeing and a little bit more expensive sets, but really cool decks. So this deck is called Planeswalker Party. And it's kind of, if you've ever heard someone say Super Friends, they mean a whole bunch of Planeswalkers in one deck. And the goal of this deck is really to use your Planeswalker abilities to change the game, to hopefully win the game, um, and duplicate those Planeswalker abilities when you can. So, our commander, our Planeswalker, for those that don't know what Planeswalkers do, they come into the battlefield. They have essentially 5 loyalty counters, which acts like 5 life, or not, however many loyalty counters. So if you look in
Yeah.
the bottom right hand corner, that's their loyalty that they come in with. And then they have these fun little abilities that allow you to add a loyalty counter or detract loyalty counters to do something. Those are called activating those abilities. So our commander for this is Commodore Guff. He is in a library, just like our friend Shauna is right now. And so this one has a static ability that happens at the beginning of your end step. You get to put a loyalty counter on another target planeswalker you control. So not this guy, but another planeswalker that's on the battlefield. He has a +1 ability. So you're gonna, if you put him into the battlefield, you can +1 him, and you can create a 1/1 red wizard creature token that you can tap to basically add red mana. And that mana can only be used to cast planeswalker spells. Or you can minus his loyalty or his life, so to speak, to draw X cards, and Commodore Guff deals X damage to each opponent, where X is the number of planeswalkers you control.
Nice.
Normally, you can't use a planeswalker as a commander unless it says what this one does at the very bottom. Commodore Guff can be your commander. So there's a few command or planeswalkers out there that you can use as a commander. So
Nice.
that's kind of how planeswalkers work. We won't go into that every single time we talk about a planeswalker because there's a lot of planeswalkers in this deck and you might get bored with us. So there was a few questions that we talked about, though, that you might need to know using a planeswalker as a commander. The first one is because Commander Guff has this X ability that deals X damage to each opponent, where X is the number of planeswalkers you control. And commander damage is a thing when you are playing commander. You cannot take 21 combat damage from any commander, or you just lose the game. Doesn't matter how much life you have. So, this ability that you're using is not combat damage, so it does not count as commander damage. So, that is a question that often gets asked when there's abilities doing damage.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other question is what does it mean to choose a planeswalker type? So
Mm-hmm.
that is because we have a second commander option, which is Leori Spark Touch Hunter for 3. It's a little 3/3, has flying and vigilance. And whenever Leori Spark Touch Hunter deals combat damage to a player, you get to choose a planeswalker type until the end of turn when you activate an ability. If it's a ability of a planeswalker of that type, copy that ability. You may choose new targets for the copies. So the type is always in the type line. It's right in the middle of the card, and all of your planeswalkers will say legendary planeswalker dash something, which is usually their name, and that is the type that you're going to choose. So let's say you have 3 Chandras on the battlefield, you could choose Chandra as the name, and then you could activate, whenever you activate a Chandra planeswalker, then you can copy that ability and choose new targets for the copies. So That is what it means when it's saying choose a planeswalker type. So I'm sorry, there was lots to unpack there, but now that we've unpacked it, we are going to break this deck down a little bit for you, talk about mana curve, color types, and all that kind of stuff. So Sean is going to do that for us.
Okay, so this breakdown, first one I'm going to give you is the mana curve. So this one is pretty on curve, like a nice little bell shape that we talk about. So it has 4 at 0 to 1 cost, and 14 at 2, 3, and 4, and 11 at 5, and only 5 at 6 plus. So it's a nice. Chances are you're gonna be able to play everything every turn. You're gonna be able to play something, so that's good. And then Leslie's also made a little graph of the Planeswalker curve, so you can see how they stack up as far as mana cost goes. So 5 of them are at 3 cost, 7 of them are at 4, 4 of them are at 5, and 2 are at 6 plus. So as you can see, there's a lot of Planeswalkers in here. And again, they follow that curve. You want your decks to follow that curve as much as possible. We've also got a color breakdown for these. So we've got 19 white, 12 blue, 9 red, 8 multicolor, and 14 colorless. They usually are artifacts and stuff. And then as far as card types go, obviously we have the 18 planeswalkers, 15 artifacts, 17 creatures is all we have, 9 sorceries and instances, and only 3 enchantments. So see, it's a planeswalker / Super Friends deck. And I'm going to let Leslie tell you about the deck building formula that we like to use when we build our decks.
Perfect. So if any of you out there have watched us before, we like this little formula that we use when we build our own decks, and it follows pretty closely to a lot of the precons out there. So we recommend that you have 1 commander, 15 ramp, 13 card draw, 15 removal, 12 high impact, 10 support, and around 34 land. Any of those numbers can fluctuate up or down, a couple cards, and you're just fine. And of course, it might change depending on the archetype and things you want to do. So with this deck, we can see that we're pretty on par, which we'll talk about each of these sections and go through the cards in a minute. But mana and mana generation is 15 and 14, so that's pretty good. Card draw, we're at 13. The deck has 10. Removal, we recommend 15. This deck has 12. High impact, we recommend 12. This deck we figured has 14, so a little bit more high impact there, which is great to see. And then support, we recommend 10, and this has around 11. So this is pretty on par with what we like to see when we're just building a basic first deck. And you can go up and change those to more high impact as you go. So our first section is what, Shauna?
It's those ramp mana generating cards that we like to have. So a lot of these artifacts and things like that. So the very first one we've got here is the Wayfarer's Bauble, and it is a 1 mana cost artifact that lets you pay 2 and sacrifice it and search for a basic land, put it on the battlefield tapped. So that's a good way to get that one color that you're missing.
And we have 3 talismans in this deck. The Talisman of Progress, Creativity, and Conviction. Each of them taps for colorless, or you can add one of the different colors that are on there. The only caveat is that they will deal 1 damage to you if you want to use them for a colored mana, which is okay. You can use your life for that when you need to fix, because it is a 5-color deck, I believe. So that's going to affect. No, 3 colors.
It's 3.
Yeah, 3 colors.
Here. We have another one that's 5.
Yes.
Yes, and along those lines, we want to have, again, we want to make sure we get those 3 colors. So we've got 3 signets in this. So this is it signet, which is red and blue that it taps for, and Azorius, which is blue and white, and then the Boros signet, which taps for the red and white. So that will help you out as well.
And those ones are great too, because they tap for both at the same time. They just cost 1 and tap for both. And then we have the 2 that you see in a lot of commander decks that add 1 mana of any color. One is that a land produces that you control, and the other is of your commander's color identity. So the Fellware Stone and the Arcane Signet, they're good for color fixing. They kind of can be used for any color of mana, really, essentially.
And then, of course, these decks are so awesome because they come with a Soul Ring. Pretty much every one that we've seen Has a Soul Ring, which taps pay 1, and it taps for 2 colorless, which is awesome.
Mm-hmm. And then we get into the fun, different types of mana generators. So we have Honor Worn Shaku, which is an artifact. It taps for colorless. It costs 3. But you can also tap an untapped legendary permanent you control, an untapped Honor Worn Shaku. Now remember, your planeswalkers, you're not attacking with them. So it doesn't matter if you tap them. So they are legendary permanents, and you can tap them to untap this. So if you need to get lots of mana, you can just tap it, tap a planeswalker, untap it, tap it again, tap a planeswalker, untap it,
fun.
until all your planeswalkers are tapped. And then you can have all of that mana that was floating and added up. So it's a good way to use that one.
Mm-hmm. Then there is the Gatewatch Beacon for 2 and a white. It's an artifact that enters the battlefield with 3 loyalty counters on it. And you can tap and add a white mana. And whenever Planeswalker enters the battlefield under your control, if Gatewatch Beacon has loyalty counters on it, you may move a loyalty counter from a Gatewatch Beacon onto that Planeswalker. So another way to get an extra loyalty point onto your Planeswalker.
Well, gotta love it.
Mm-hmm.
And Oresco's Explorer is a nice little cat scout for 2. It's a 2/2. And when it enters the battlefield, you get to search your library for up to X planes cards, where X is the number of players who control more lands than you. So be kind of conscious of how many lands people have on the battlefield. You reveal cards and put them into your hand, and then you shuffle. So it allows you, hopefully, if you're falling behind, to catch up on all of those lands.
Mm-hmm. And the Cartographer's Hawk. It's a little 2/1 flying birdie for 2. And when it deals combat damage to a player who controls more lands than you, you get to return this birdie to your hand. And if you do, you may search your library for a plains card and put it on the battlefield tapped, then shuffle.
I like that's that you may. So you if you don't need anything, you can just leave it on the battlefield, which is great. So our next section is card draw, tutors, things that kind of shuffle through your deck. So our formula says 13. We have about 10. There are also some in the high impact section, so that's good. And some of these are really good card draw, so that makes up for it a little bit, but that's a decent amount. So the first one is Oath of Jace for 3. It's an enchantment, legendary enchantment. When it enters the battlefield, draw 3 cards, then discard 2 cards. At the beginning of your upkeep, you scry X, where X is the number of planeswalkers you control. Scrying is so good. You're going to look at the top X cards of your library. So maybe X is 3, you have 3 planeswalkers. And you can put them back on top of your library in any order, or decide to put them on the bottom of your library if you don't need them yet, which is fantastic. And I will also point out that this is a legendary enchantment, so it is a legendary permanent, which can tap to untap that other thing that creates mana.
Yeah. Then we have a nice little sorcery for 6 that says deploy the Gatewatch. And look at the top 7 cards of your library, and you can put up to 2 Planeswalker cards from among them onto the battlefield. Whoa. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in random order. So if you want to know more about the story of Magic, go and check out what's the Gatewatch in Magic the Gathering and find out more about that.
That's crazy.
A really good card. I know.
2 Planeswalkers for 6.
They have to be in your top 7 cards, but you have how many? You have 18
There's 18
of them
in this deck. There's a good chance.
Right?
You could put more in too. So Narset, Harder Avails, the planeswalker that everybody loves to hate. She only costs 3, which is fantastic. She has 5 loyalty, but each opponent can't draw more than 1 card each turn. So they always draw their first card. That's their 1 card. So if they have any cards that say draw a card or anything like that, they can't do that. And that's only your opponents. You're just fine to draw as many cards as you want. It also has -2. Look at the top 4 cards of your library. You may reveal a non-creature card, or planeswalker, for example, from among them and put it into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in random order. So the other nice thing about this is, while it doesn't have any plus abilities, you can perhaps proliferate and add abilities. And remember, there was a few things that you can move loyalty counters onto her. So that is a good way to kind of keep her alive.
Yes. And Nahiri the Harbinger, this artwork I had on my computer screen for the longest time when I first started playing Magic, because I just fell in love with this artwork. It's beautiful. So Nahiri is a 4 loyalty for 4, 2 in red and white. And her +2 is you may discard a card. If you do, you get to draw a card. And her -2 is exile target enchantment, tapped artifact, or tapped creature. Get rid of their stuff. And -8 is search your library for an artifact or creature card, put it on the battlefield, then shuffle your library. It gains haste, and then you have to return it to your hand at the beginning of the next end step. But get in there for something good. Nice.
So Jace Mirror Mage. Jace, we kind of got Jaced out for a while there, but I'm kind of missing Jace actually. So I'd like to see him come back to the
Where did he go? We don't know.
Where did he go? He just hasn't been in things. But for 3, he's a 4 loyalty planeswalker. He has kicker 2. So when he comes into the battlefield, if he was kicked, so you can pay an extra 2, you get to create a token that's a copy of him. And except it's not a legendary. And its starting loyalty is 1. So he's kind of like a weaker version of, because remember the legendary rule is you can never have more than 1 legendary with the same name on the battlefield. So you can have 2 Jaces on the battlefield, but you can only have 2 or 1 legendary Jace Mirror Mage. That's why it comes in as a non-legendary. So his +1 ability is to scry 2. And you can 0 him, which is great because you don't have to minus him at all. To draw a card, reveal it, remove a number of loyalty counters equal to that card's converted mana cost from Jace Mirror Mage. So it will depend on what you pull to see where and if he stays alive.
A little risky.
But you're going to scry, so hopefully you'll set that.
Yeah, you'll know. Jace, Architect of Thought for 2 and 2 blue. It's a 4 that says +1 until your next turn. Whenever a creature an opponent control attacks, it gets -1 until end of turn. -1, -0. And -2 is reveal the top 3 cards of your library. An opponent separates those cards into 2 piles. Put 1 pile into your hand and the other on the bottom of your library in any order. And his -8 is for each player, search that player's library for a non-land card and exile it. Then that player shuffles. You may cast those cards without paying their mana cost. Oh dear.
It's a little bit removal. It's a little
steal
bit
something.
Ugh, crazy.
Yeah.
And the last Jace is Jace Bellerin for 3. He's a 3 loyalty planeswalker. He's not a legendary planeswalker, so that's different. You can +2 him, and each player draws a card. You can -1 him, and target player draws a card. So if you want to be more specific, and his -10 ability is target player puts the top 20 cards of his or her library into his or her graveyard. So a little bit of mill there. You're probably just going to use it to give people some benefits or just draw 1 card.
Nice. And then we have Narset, the Enlightened Master, 3/2 for 3 and the blue, red, and white. She has first strike and hexproof, and whenever she attacks, you get to exile the top 4 cards of your library. Until end of turn, you may cast non-creature cards exiled with Narset this turn without paying their mana costs. I have her as a commander in a Planeswalker Super Friends type deck because it's so amazing to get all that stuff for free. It's crazy.
And Mangara, the Diplomat, is always the Diplomat. We love this card. For 4, it's a 2/4 with lifelink. And whenever an opponent attacks with creature, if 2 or more of those creatures are attacking you or planeswalkers that you control, you get to draw a card. So a little bit of disincentive to attack you. Whenever an opponent casts their second spell each turn, you get to draw a card. So a lot more card draw. That's a really great card.
And then we have Narset of the Ancient Way, the 4 loyalty for 1 and a blue, red, and white Narset. And +1 is you gain 2 life, and you get to add a blue, red, or white spend on a non-creature spell only. Or you can -2 and draw a card, then you may discard a card. When you discard a non-land card this way, she does damage equal to that card's converted mana cost to a target creature or planeswalker. And then her -6 is you get an emblem that says whenever you cast a non-creature spell, this emblem deals 2 damage to any target.
Is this our first emblem? I think it's our first
It
emblem.
might be.
Can you explain what an emblem is?
Okay, so an emblem is a permanent that gets put on the battlefield, can't be removed, that has some sort of ability like this one, that just has to happen all the time. They can't do anything, can't interact with it in any way. So it's
Yeah.
stuck there.
Yeah, that's the thing about emblems is that it's just
Mm-hmm.
there and you can't do anything about it. So
Yeah.
more on that later when we get to other emblems.
Yeah.
So our next section is removal. We recommend 15. This deck has 12, so decent. The first one is, oh gosh, Niveniral's Disc. Did I say that right?
Ned's
For
disc.
4, Nev's Disc, exactly. We just say Nev. Nev's Disc enters the battlefield tapped, and then when you untap it the next turn, you can pay 1 and tap to destroy all artifacts, creatures, and enchantments. So they don't get rid of it. There is a good little board wipe for those artifacts, creatures, and enchantments. Or you can just kind of keep it there of like, don't piss me
Don't
off.
mess with me. Don't
Don't mess with me because I have this thing and I can tap it at instant speed. So
there we go. Then there you have a legendary sorcery called Urza's Ruinous Blast. And a legendary sorcery can only be cast if you have a legendary something out on the creature or planeswalker out on the battlefield. So it says exile all non-land permanents that aren't legendary. So it's going to probably help you and not help them. It might not touch their commanders, but get rid of all those little tokens and stuff.
Yeah. Well, and same with the disc, right? Like it's getting rid of artifacts, creatures, and enchantments, but you notice it doesn't get rid of planeswalkers. So
right.
Perfect. Board wipes are perfect. Promise of Loyalty is also a great one. For 5, we have a sorcery. Each player puts a vow counter on a creature they control and sacrifices the rest. Each of those creatures can't attack you or planeswalkers you control for as long as it has a vow counter on it. So you're going to do a board wipe. You're going to leave them with one thing that now they have to attack somebody else. So speed up the game. Keep yourself safe.
Yep. And then Blasphemous Act. It is a sorcery as well, and the spell costs 1 less to cast for each creature on the battlefield. So yeah, 8 in red, but chances are you're going to be wiping the board anyways because it's got lots of creatures. So it's hopefully going to be just 1 red, and it deals 13 damage to each creature.
Yeah.
And you probably don't have creatures, so you're probably fine.
You're fine. We're fine.
Yep.
Swords to Plowshares. Great little staple here for 1 exile target creature. Its controller gains life equal to its power, so they get something a little bit nice out of it. However, you're able to kind of do that targeted removal when you need to.
Path to Exile, similar thing. Instant for 1 that says exile target creature, and its controller may search their library for a basic land card and put it on the battlefield tapped. So similar.
And then Guff rewrites history. I love this because he has like a little drawing that I think his son was working on. I don't know, but it's got like little flowers and things like that in it. This is a very wordy card, so I'm going to read through it.
Yeah.
But basically, it's another chaos warp. So for each player, so it happens multiple times, you choose a non-enchantment, non-land permanent that player controls. So whatever it is, just not a land and not an enchantment. Those permanents owners shuffle those things that you chose into their libraries. Then each player who controlled one of those permanents exiles cards from the top of their library until they exile a non-land card, and then puts the rest on the bottom of their library in random order. Each player may cast the non-land card they exile without paying its mana cost. So you're going to choose a couple things from each player, or one thing from each player. They're going to shuffle it into their library, but then they get to replace it with something. It might be an instant, sorcery, enchantment, anything, basically just anything that's not a land. They can choose to cast it without paying its mana cost. So this could be bad for you, but it also could be good. Who knows?
It's chaos, like Leslie said.
Yeah.
The Silent Arbiter is a 4-cost 1/5 construct creature that says no more than 1 creature can attack each combat. It doesn't bother you any. And no
Nope.
more than one creature can block each combat. So it really stymies them and lets you do your thing.
Slow them down.
Mm-hmm.
And we love the Wanderer. The Wanderer is some great removal for 4. She is a 5 loyalty. Again, she doesn't have any plus abilities, but she does prevent all non-combat damage that you would be dealt to you or other planeswalkers you control. So no more of these like, I'll do 4 damage to your face or 4 damage to your planeswalker. It has to be with combat, but you got Silent Arbiter. They can only swing with one thing. You can -2 to exile target creature with power 4 or greater. So she's got a little bit of exile, and hopefully you can again keep her alive by proliferating or something like that.
Yeah. Then there's Gideon Jura for 6 loyalty for 5, 3 and 2 white. +2 during target opponent's next turn. Creatures that player controls attack Gideon instead. And -2 is destroy target tapped creature. And his 0 ability until end of turn, Gideon becomes a 6/6 human soldier creature that's still a planeswalker. And you get to prevent all damage that would be dealt to him this turn. So he's going to be a creature for you. That's pretty nice. Yeah.
And we didn't say this, but you can activate a planeswalker once each of your turns. It has to be like at sorcery speed. So it has to be on your turn. It could be in either main phase and once. So you're going to kind of go through each of your planeswalkers and decide when you want to do them, their abilities. But Elspeth, Sun's Champion for 6. She's 4 loyalty. She allows you to create 3 1/1 white soldier creature tokens, great little blockers. Her -3 is destroy all creatures with power 4 or greater, so word wipe. And -7 is another emblem, and we love our emblems. Creatures you control get +2/+2 and have flying. So suddenly, any creatures you do have, which there are some token generators in here to kind of protect your stuff, now have an emblem that never goes away, giving them +2/+2 and flying.
Then we have Chandra's Torch of Defiance for 2 and 2 red, a 4 mana cost, 4 mana cost, 4 loyalty planeswalker. So this card could be in high impact. It's a very, very strong card. It does a lot of things. When people see it come out, they're not going to be happy. So this could win you the game, this card as well. But we thought put it into removal because that's her primary job for most of the time. Her +1 is exile the top card of your library, and you may cast that card. And if you don't, Chandra does 2 damage to each opponent. Or her other +1 is you can add 2 red, which is awesome. Or you can -3 and she deals 4 damage to target creature. So that happens a lot. And her -7 is, again, an emblem thing. You get an emblem with whenever you cast a spell, this emblem deals 5 damage to any target. So if you can get to her -7, it is insane.
Yeah. You'll want to do +1s as much as you want. I will also say too, even if, let's say you didn't want to exile the top card of your library or anything like that, and you don't have the mana, like you're not going to use the mana, it doesn't stop you from doing the +1 ability. You can do the +1 ability, have the mana, enter the battlefield, float, and then move on, and it just disappears. It's not a big deal. So even if you're not doing that thing, you can still +1 them.
Definitely.
All right, so high impact. These are things that we think will maybe turn the tides of the game or win you the game or just be really powerful in this particular deck. So formula, we think you should have at least 12 cards that will do that. This has 14, so that's fantastic. For 5, you have Oath of Teferi. Funny because they didn't put any Teferis in this deck. But we will probably ask you to change that. When Oath of Teferi enters the battlefield, exile another target permanent you control, return it to the battlefield under its owner's control at the beginning of the next end step. So that's your end step. Also, you may activate the loyalty abilities of planeswalkers you control twice each turn rather than only once. So powerful. You now get to do all your planeswalkers' abilities twice. And when it enters, that planeswalker that maybe has less life that everyone's been trying to kill, if you remove it from the battlefield and bring it back in, it comes back in with all of its loyalty again. So, great way to get it back.
Oh, gosh. The Chain Veil is a 4 mana cost legendary artifact that says at the beginning of your end step, if you didn't activate a loyalty ability of a planeswalker this turn, you lose 2 life. Of course, you're going to do that. But you can pay 4 and tap this, and for each planeswalker you control, you may activate one of its loyalty abilities once this turn, as though none of its loyalty abilities have been activated this turn. Whew.
And that is an instant. So it says once this turn, so that would mean that you could activate them on somebody else's turn.
You think so?
Oh. So that's a good way to kind of like do some of those things that you needed to do on somebody else's turn. Repeated Reverberation is a 4 mana cost instant, and when you next cast an instant spell or cast a sorcery spell or activate a loyalty ability, which is what this is in for, copy that spell or ability twice. You may choose new targets for a copy. So it's just another way, again, to get that second loyalty ability happening.
Very cool. Vronos, the Masked Inquisitor. We think this is a new card. We're pretty sure. It's a 5 mana cost for 5, 3 and 2 blue, Planeswalker. It says +1 up to 2 other target Planeswalkers you control phase out at the beginning of your next end step. So that means they basically disappear off the battlefield. They don't leave the battlefield. They're just in a different
Just pretend they don't exist.
place. They're just not there. So they can't be injured, basically. And then you can -2 for each opponent. Return up to 1 target non-land permanent that player controls to its owner's hand. And -7, target artifact you control becomes a 9/9 construct artifact creature and gains vigilance, indestructible, and this creature can't be blocked. Oh, suddenly your arcane signet is swinging in for 9.
Everyone loves a soul ring.
Oh, geez.
I guess also if you're going to phase out some of your planeswalkers, make sure that you have used their abilities first, because once you phase them out, once you use this ability, they're gone out of the game, or not. They don't exist now until your next turn, so you can't use them either. Sarkhan the Masterless is going to hopefully change the game for you, because he's a 5 loyalty, 5 mana cost planeswalker. When a creature attacks you or planeswalkers you control, each dragon you control deals 1 damage to that creature. Probably not as relevant in this deck, but there are some dragons because you can +1 him, and until the end of turn, each planeswalker you control becomes a 4/4 red dragon creature token with flying. This is possibly dangerous because once you turn all your planeswalkers into creatures, they can die to board wipes. So just be careful. But you can also -3 to create a 4/4 red dragon creature token with flying. So you can create some dragons just by -3ing him and turning your planeswalkers into 4/4 dragons and swinging in. And then they go back to being planeswalkers at the end of the turn is great.
So crazy. And you can still do their loyalty abilities and stuff. It's not
you sure can. Yeah.
Oh. And then Chandra Legacy of Fire. I'm pretty sure this is a new card as well, but I have to get the picture for it. It looks like it's a new one. So for 4 and a red, it's a 3 loyalty. And at the beginning of your end step, it deals X damage to each opponent, where X is the number of planeswalkers you control. Just for being there. You don't have to do anything. +1, you get to add a red for each planeswalker you control. Could be massive. And her 0 is remove a loyalty counter from each of any number of permanents you control and exile that many cards from the top of your library, and then you may play them this turn. So yeah.
Still got to pay for them, but
you got to pay for them, but yeah, you're going to have potentially, Anyway, it's good. It's a good card.
Such great artwork too, because if you think of, like, you see Jaya and Ajani and I think Anissa in the back there. So that whole legacy of fire and the whole what happened in Brothers War and sadness. Okay, Chandra Awakened Inferno for 6 is a 6 loyalty. It cannot be countered. So you want to counter my spell. Too bad, so sad. For +2, each opponent gets an emblem, which they cannot deal with. At the beginning of their upkeep, it deals 1 damage to you. So they get this emblem that's going to do 1 damage to them, and you can do that each turn. And then they have 2 emblems, and then they have 3 emblems, and they're
Each
taking
opponent.
3 damage each opponent.
So
Yeah,
good.
so that's going to be really powerful. They are going to want to kill this Chandra for sure. -3, it does 3 damage to each non-elemental creature, so potentially a good board wipe there. And then she has a -X, where it deals X damage to target creature or planeswalker. If a permanent dealt damage this way would die, this turn exile it instead. So nice little exile, nice little -X damage, depending on how much life you would like to use. It's great.
Johnny's Steadfast. This is a 4 mana cost for loyalty. Planeswalker Johnny. +1 until end of turn. Up to 1 target creature gets +1/+1 in first strike, vigilance, and lifelink. Helps you stay alive. And -2 put a 1/1 counter on each creature you control and a loyalty counter on each other planeswalker you control. Nice. Do that right away. And is -7 is you get an emblem that says if a source would deal damage to you or a planeswalker you control, prevent all but 1 of that damage.
Fun.
So they only get to do 1 damage to whatever.
1 damage to whatever they want to do. Doesn't matter if it's a 10/10 or not.
Doesn't matter.
Thrumming Bird for 2. It's a 1/1 flyer. Well, why is a 1/1 flyer for 2 in our high impact? Because when it deals combat damage to a player, you're going to proliferate, which means you can add any type of counter to any number of creatures and or planeswalkers or permanents. So then you can put plus loyalty counters on all of your planeswalkers just by doing damage with this. It's a flyer. It's going to get in pretty easily. Hopefully they don't have a lot of things to deal with flying. So that's a really high impact for this deck.
And this little guy too, the 0/5 for 2 in a blue. Why is it in here? But it is at the beginning of combat on your turn. You get to choose any number of target planeswalkers you control until end of turn. They become 3/3 flying birds that have hexproof, so they're protected. And whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, scry 1. So it helps you dig through your deck.
So great. Yeah.
And lets you swing in and get some damage in with your planeswalkers, which is bizarre, but good.
Onaki Oathkeeper for 2 is a 0/4. Creatures can't attack planeswalkers you control unless they pay 1 for each creature they control that's attacking a planeswalker that you control. So nice little don't attack me or you'll have to pay for it card specific for planeswalkers. And you can also pay 6 and exile this guy from your graveyard to return a target planeswalker card from your graveyard to the battlefield. So once he gets into your graveyard, he can bring back a planeswalker, which is great.
Speaking of bringing back planeswalkers, this is Jaya's Phoenix. So in her memory here, we have a Phoenix for 3/3 with flying and haste. It says whenever Jaya's Phoenix deals combat damage to a player or planeswalker, you get to copy the next loyalty ability you activate this turn when you activate it. And we choose new targets for the copy. So, and whenever you cast a planeswalker spell, you may return the Phoenix from your graveyard to the battlefield. I love it. It's still here.
It never goes away. Deep Glow Skate for 5 is a 3/3. When it enters the battlefield, double the number of each kind of counter on any number of target permanents. So if you have a whole bunch of planeswalkers out, you're just going to double the amount of loyalty counters on all of them. Any number.
Oh dear. And we talked about Leori, the Spark Touch Hunter. It is your other commander if you want to use it. 3/3 for 3. That's a flying vigilance. Lovely elemental cat that when it deals combat damage to a player, you get to choose a planeswalker type and do activate an ability again, which is awesome. That's what you said before.
Yeah. And the support section, we think that you should have around 10 that kind of support your theme or help your win conditions along. This deck has 11, which is, again, right on par. Oath of Gideon is the first one. For 3, it's a legendary enchantment. When it enters the battlefield, you get to put 2 1/1 white core ally creature tokens onto the battlefield. And then each planeswalker you control enters the battlefield with an additional loyalty counter on it. So get some blockers and some extra loyalty.
Semester's End is an instant that says exile any number of target creatures or planeswalkers you control at the beginning of your next end step. Return each of them to the battlefield under its owner's control. Each of them enters the battlefield with an additional 1/1 counter on it if it's a creature, and an additional loyalty counter on it if it's a planeswalker. Celebrate good times. Yeah.
Come on. That's a party. It's a party. Norn's Annex for 3 and 2 Phyrexian white mana. Phyrexian mana can be paid with life, 2 life instead of your white or your plains. But you can also just pay it with white. So creatures can't attack you or planeswalkers you control unless their controller plays 2 life or a white for each of those creatures. So it's specific to white. If they can't pay white, they have to pay life in order to attack you, which is great.
Saheeli the Sublime Artificer, 5 loyalty for 1 and a blue or red. 2 of them, blue or red pips there. And whenever you cast a non-creature spell, again, planeswalkers, you get to make a servo artifact token. So that's going to help you protect your planeswalkers. And you can -2, and a target artifact you control becomes a copy of another target artifact or creature you control till end of turn, except it's an artifact in addition to its other types.
Cool. You could have 2 Norn's Annexes. Nice.
I guess
KO, Geometric Tactician for 3 is a 3 loyalty planeswalker. He has this little ability that when he enters the battlefield, you get to create a little wall, 0/4 wall token with defender and flying.
Nice.
His +1 is you get to target opponent, you and target opponent each draw a card. So make some friends, draw some cards. -2, choose left or right. Until your next turn, each player may attack only the nearest opponent in the last chosen direction and planeswalkers controlled by that opponent. So if you say left,
get away from me.
Only attack the person on your left, which is fun.
Oh, brother. And Wall of Denial, similar but not quite as cool. A 0/8 that says defender and flying, and it has Shroud, which means that it can't be the target of spells or abilities. It's just going to sit there. You can't do anything to it, and they can't do anything to it.
Yeah. Protect those planeswalkers. Fog Bank does the same for 2. It's a 0/2 defender with flying. Prevent all combat damage that would be dealt to Fog Bank. So it will never take combat damage. You can block anything with it, and it's fine. And it's flyer, so great.
Then you have Spark Double. You may have it enter the battlefield as a copy of a creature or planeswalker you control. Keyword planeswalker there as well, except it enters with an additional +1 counter on it if it's a creature, and it enters with an additional loyalty counter if it's a planeswalker, and it isn't legendary. So you can have 2 of them out there. Very cool.
Kazul, Tyrant of the Cliffs for 5. It's a 5/4. And when a creature an opponent controls attacks, if you're the defending player, create a 3/3 red ogre creature token unless that creature's controller pays 3. So that's for each creature, because it says whenever a creature an opponent control attacks. If you're the defending player, then you're going to create for everything that's attacking you. They have to either pay 3 or you get a 3/3 ogre, which could result in crack pack or blockers or whatever.
Yep. Then we have our first proliferate card, Grateful Apparition. It is a 1/1 spirit with flying. For 2, and whenever it deals combat damage to a player or planeswalker, you get to proliferate. So you get in there for damage, and you get to add those counters like we talked about.
Yeah. And the last support card that we have here is probably the best support card that we have. It's Flux Channeler for 3. It's a 2/2. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, proliferate. You cast a planeswalker, it's a non-creature spell, you proliferate. You cast an instant, a sorcery, an artifact, an enchantment, anything, you get to proliferate and keep those counters coming.
Yep.
Love it.
Yeah, so this deck has 38 lands that come with it. Some really good ones for sure. Quite impressive, the lands in these decks. And the formula calls for 34, so that might give you some room to do things. One of the things that we've wanted to point out is it comes with Karn's Bastion, which is a land that actually lets you pay for and proliferate. So that is a really, really good land to have in a deck like this one. But just take a look at some of the other lands that are in there. They're really quite good.
Mm-hmm.
Then we're on to the tweaks. I'll let Leslie tell us about our first tweak. Thank you for hanging out with us.
Sure. So if you've made it this far, you are interested to find out what we would do with this deck. These are only some suggestions. We would love to hear what you have to say and what you would add to this deck. The first one that we thought would be a fun one is just Comet, the Stellar Pup. So this is an uncard, but it is legal in Commander. So for 4, you get a 5 loyalty little planeswalker named Comet. He has a 0, which just allows you to roll a 6-sided dice. And each of the, whatever you roll, will add something. So we thought this would be just a fun thing to add. If you roll a 1 or a 2, you get to, oh, I need to make this bigger. Leslie is
You can see it.
blind. Leslie cannot see.
Poor Leslie.
Okay, so you get to +2, then basically add 2 loyalty to him, and then create a 1/1 green squirrel creature token that gains haste until the end of turn. If you roll a 3, you're going to minus him, then return a card with a mana value 2 or less from your graveyard to your hand. And it's a card, so it could be an instant, sorcery, whatever. 4 or 5, it deals damage equal to the number of loyalty counters on him to a creature or planeswalker. Then he's going to get -2. And then if you roll a 6, you're going to +1 him, and you may activate Comet Stellar Pup's loyalty ability 2 more times. So you get to roll the dice 2 more times. We like it because it's just super random and fun and would be a great addition.
Very fun. Then we have the beautiful Sarah the Benevolent, sorry. Is that the one you played today, Leslie?
That is the one that won me that game. Yep,
it
sure did. Won me
card.
my game today.
She's amazing. For 2 and 2 white, she has a +2 of creatures you control with flying. Get +1/+1 until end of turn. And her -3 is you get to create a flying angel with flying and vigilance, which is awesome. And her -6 is you get an emblem that says if you control a creature, damage that would reduce your life total to less than 1 reduces it to 1 instead.
Yeah.
You can't quite die as long as you keep creating creatures with her.
Stops you from dying, and some of those planeswalkers create servos and things like that, right?
Yep.
So the other thing we talked about earlier when we were talking about Oath of Teferi is that there was no Teferis in this deck, and there are definitely some good Teferis. There are actually lots of planeswalkers that fit the color identity that you could put in this deck, but we only picked some of the ones that we thought would be the best. But please give us some suggestions of what you think would be the best as well. So 5 mana for a 4 loyalty, +1 is to draw a card, and then at the beginning of your next end step, you get to untap 2 lands. -3, target non-land permanent, put it into its owner's library, 3rd from the top. So you're just going to like put something into their library. And then it's -8. The most annoying part of Hero of Dominaria is they get an emblem, or you get an emblem, that whenever you draw a card, you get to exile target permanent an opponent controls. So now you're going to draw, untap, upkeep, draw, exile of a target permanent, and it just keeps going, and it's not a non-land permanent. So eventually you can get rid of their lands if you want, so they can't play anything. Yeah. It's just dumb. I hate it. But it would be a great addition to this deck.
It would be, for sure. So with this one, Teferi Temporal Pilgrim, for 3 and 2 blue, it's one of the newer ones that says whenever you draw a card, you get to put a loyalty counter on it. So yeah, I've seen them get quite high. And then you can 0 as draw a card. So there you go. You're going to get +1 actually. And -2, you get to create a 2/2 blue spirit creature token with vigilance. And whenever you draw a card, you put a 1/1 counter on it. Just again, stupid. And -12, target opponent chooses a permanent they control and returns it to its owner's hands. Then they shuffle each non-land permanent they control into its owner's library.
So they get to keep one thing from their battlefield, and everything else just gets shuffled back in.
Yeah.
Rewind.
Yeah.
Venser the Sojourner for 5 is a 3 mana cost. Its +2 is to exile target permanent you own, return it to the battlefield under your control at the beginning of your next end step. So again, blinking that planeswalker, having it come back in with all its loyalty. -1, creatures are unblockable this turn. You're probably not going to use that as much. But you also have a -8. You get an emblem with whenever you cast a spell, exile target permanent. So constant removal if you have Venser on the battlefield.
Definitely. And if you have an Ugin the Spirit Dragon, this is the deck to put it in.
Shame on
For
you.
8, I'm not playing with you. It's a 7 loyalty Ugin that says +2. It deals 3 damage to any target. -X, exile each permanent with converted mana cost X or less. That's 1 or more colors. So yeah, that could be bad, and you could do that right away. And -10, you gain 7 life, draw 7 cards, and put up to 7 permanent cards from your hand onto the battlefield. Ugh.
Crazy.
2 turns for when it
Nice
comes out.
removal. But remember, exile each permanent with converted mana cost X or less with 1 or more colors also counts yours,
Yes.
including your planeswalkers.
Yes, it does.
So we also thought kind of flickering things back and forth into the battlefield. Again, your planeswalkers, having them come back in was something that might be a good addition to this deck because there wasn't a lot of it. So for 3 and 2 hybrid mana, so that means you can play white or blue. You can get a 4/5 companion, not relevant for this deck, but it has flying, and when it enters the battlefield, exile any number of non-land permanents you own and control. Return those cards to the battlefield at the beginning of your next end step. So just kind of a reset for anything that you need reset.
Shark Typhoon, this is a enchantment that's for 5 and a blue, but it says whenever you cast a non-creature spell, you get to make an XX blue shark creature token with flying, where X is that spell's converted mana cost. And so yeah, you can use that to protect your planeswalkers a little bit, because they would make a shark as they come out, or you could just cycle this to draw a card based on X. So X and 1 in a blue, and you get to draw a card for that many. When you cycle, you get to create a shark creature token as well.
Yeah. So another one that kind of takes advantage of those non-creature spells that you're casting is Maniform Hellkite. Flying, whenever you cast a non-creature spell, create an XX Red Dragon Illusion creature token with flying and haste, where X is the amount of mana spent to cast that spell. So you're just going to create a whole bunch of dragons, which would go really well with Sarkhan, which is also in this deck. Exile that token at the beginning of the next end step. So you only get to keep it for 1 turn. You're going to swing in with it, hopefully do some damage, maybe benefit from Sarkhan's ability, and then it's going to disappear. But great.
And then we thought this card from One with the Machine, Ichor Moon Gauntlet for 2 and a blue, an artifact that says planeswalkers you control have 0 proliferate and -12 take an extra turn after this turn. So that after this one, so that could be really helpful. And whenever you cast a non-creature spell, you get to choose a counter on target permanent and put an additional counter of that kind on that permanent. So really cheap way to add some proliferate to this deck onto your planeswalkers.
So awesome. And it's 0 to proliferate, right? So
Yeah.
proliferate all of them, and all of your planeswalkers have that. So crazy. Tezzeret's Gambit for 3 and a blue Phyrexian mana. You can draw 2 cards, then proliferate.
Handy dandy. Kaikar Wins Fury. It's for 1 and the blue, red, and white. And we thought it would be a good one to include. A 3/3 flyer that's going to, whenever you cast a non-creature spell, it's going to make a spirit creature token, and you can sacrifice the spirit to add red mana. But again, you're going to have some blockers to protect your planeswalkers.
Yeah. So then we thought we would need some stuff to kind of, once you're doing all this stuff, to keep you from being dead. So Ghostly Prison would be a good addition to this. Creatures can't attack you unless their controller pay 2 for each creature you control or that they control that's attacking you. Now that is you, not planeswalkers. They can attack planeswalkers without paying, but that will keep you from dying, which will again help you keep your planeswalkers doing their thing.
Windborn Muse is doing the same thing, a 2/3 flyer that says creatures can't attack you unless their controller pays 2 for each creature they control. Same thing.
But Archangel of Tithes for 4 is a 3/5 with flying. As long as it is untapped. Creatures can't attack you or planeswalkers you control unless their controller pays 1 for each of those creatures. So as long as it's attacking, creatures can't block unless their controller pays 1 for each creature that blocks as well. So once you have a big state, they're tapped out, you can attack, everything is unblockable, or you can make it harder to attack you or planeswalkers. So yeah, that's our last tweak.
Woo! So thanks for watching. That was we're having a lot of fun with these decks here. So
yes.
Hang out with us on YouTube and Twitch. You can hang out and see us there. Also, feel free to connect with us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. We'd love to hear how you would tweak this deck. There's lots of interesting ways to do that. And that's it for this time. And we'll see you next time. And in the meantime,
tap those magic cards and have fun doing it. Bye, guys.
Bye, everyone.